Right, we turn to this now. The ANC has summoned its former president, Jacob Zuma, to appear before a disciplinary hearing. And on Tuesday, he faces 2 charges, one for denouncing the ANC leadership and another for pledging his support to the newly formed uMkhonto Sizwe party. Zuma will be the face of MK party during elections on May 29th. Meanwhile, the MK party has vowed to turn out in their numbers in support of their leader when he is set to appear at Luthuli House. Right, let's get reaction to this now. We're joined by the ANC spokesperson, Mahlengi Bhengu-Motsiri. Mahlengi, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on. Let's start here. What necessitates the ANC to, at this particular point, impose charges on the former president when you didn't do it when he made the announcement last year in December? Mahlengi, good evening. Can you hear us?
Good evening, Tebo. I just need to test if my audio is good. I'm on the ground on a campaign trail.
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. My question is, what necessitates the move for the ANC to lay charges now when it didn't do so on December 16th?
Oh, well, that is actually quite a question that I was confronted with several times today. And I think the question misses an understanding of how the internal processes work within the ANC, because the ANC is very clinical about how it undertakes a process of disciplining a member that has erred. It doesn't matter the social standing or the political station of the member in question, whether they're the president or a member. Most of these processes undergo quite a thorough process. And this is now under the aegis of the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC. There's absolutely nothing remiss about the announcement today by the NDC that it has summoned Jacob Zuma, Mr. Jacob Zuma, to a hearing following his suspension. There are lots of things that have to be done once a person has been suspended. There's a thing of appointing a presenter, as you would know. There's a thing of collating evidence. There's a thing of doing all the due diligence before a person is brought to a hearing. And the ANC would not take an easy way out or simply just expelling Mr. Jacob Zuma on the basis of the types of transgressions that are well known to South Africans. The ANC has got to be seen to be fair, equitable, just, transparent, as well as making sure that the audi alteram partem rule is not compromised, regardless of the circumstances that we're facing.
All right, got to be careful here to phrase this properly. He is actively campaigning for another party. He has now become the face of that party, a message that was sent to the IEC. To a degree, that party has been challenging the ANC in court. Is he still a member?
Well, to the extent that he's on suspension, he is still a member, a suspended member. And that is why we need to have the full completion of this process. And of course, we cannot speculate what the outcome of the processes of the National Disciplinary Committee are going to be. We who are the ordinary ones that are not part of the esteemed NDC of the ANC, which is made up of stalwarts and veterans of the ANC and strong legal minds in the ANC, we cannot speculate what they will come, the conclusion that they will come to. We have our own views, of course, from a political management perspective as members of the National Executive Committee and as well as the national officials of the ANC, given the type of the things they are describing, Thabo.
So I'm asking that because some of your leaders have said, well, he's already defined himself outside of a party. In fact, at some point, I think if it's not the chairperson who was pushed to say, is he in the party, say, well, he's already out of the party.
Yes, they are correct. I'm sorry for the interjection. I think it's our gadget. Sorry for the interjection. But they are correct. I mean, that is our perspective as those of us who are in the National Executive Committee, and I think our entire membership of the ANC, or the big part of our membership. But it is important to allow the National Disciplinary Committee the space to do its work with utmost fairness, adhering to the principle of fairness, as well as making sure that the other side is heard, so that we are seen to be consistent in how we execute discipline in the organization. And this forms part of the ANC's own case law. So these things will be referred to some years later. It's not the first time we're going through an experience of this nature. The ANC went through these in the 40s, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, and so on. So there is a bit of ANC's own case law as far as matters of this nature are concerned. It's important that they're handled with utmost care.
It's ANC policy. It's within the ANC's right, I suppose, not to act with haste and follow its constitution. But you've left it to the point where one could reach that conclusion to say you're almost attempting to discipline a leader of another party. Why am I saying so? Because the MK party, for example, says they are going to be outside Luthuli House on Tuesday to support former President Jacob Zuma, who is a leader of their party. So how do you discipline a leader of another party?
Well, Thabo, as I say, and I will reiterate, that to the extent that he is suspended as a member of the ANC, the ANC has got to make sure that there's due diligence in terms of how it treats him by way of discipline. I'm not at liberty to pronounce on behalf of the National Disciplinary Committee. I will be remiss in my responsibilities. But I can say that indeed our members are really feeling strongly about the fact that this situation has been allowed to go on. And I do want to assure our members and our supporters and the general public that it is not for a lack of that. It is for a situation where the ANC wants to satisfy itself that the processes that it embarks upon are thorough and they cannot be litigated in a culture where litigation is very uppermost in our society, thanks to the freedoms that the ANC fought for, together with its allies in the mass democratic movement. And so it's important that he is given an opportunity to articulate his position. We do hope that Jacob Zuma will show up. Mr. Jacob Zuma will show up on the day that is appointed for his hearing. And if he doesn't show up, of course, the thing doesn't stop. The NDC will continue to make the pronouncements that it wants to make on that particular day. As for the supporters of the Jacob Zuma party that would want to descend on Luthuli House, we're not going to allow a situation where the Luthuli House, which is the foremost headquarters of this illustrious, glorious movement on the African continent and the world, is the resident. We're not going to allow anyone to come and disrupt the work that we do there in order to drive the transformation journey that was embarked upon 30 years ago. We're on the elections, we're focusing on our elections, we're not even focused on this matter, despite what pundits are saying and what analysts are saying. We're not focused on this matter. What the NDC of the ANC is doing is basically doing what it ought to have done anyway, regardless of whether it's an election year or not. Our focus is on being on the ground. Right now, all the National Executive Committee members, all our top 7 officials are in various provinces who are working hard. As I speak to you right now, I'm in Cape Town with the president of the ANC. We're focused on winning the election, and we're going to win the election with an outright majority. We're not focused on Jacob Zuma's party. It's not an MK party. It's Jacob Zuma's party. The MK belongs to the African National Congress. And you know the outcome of that court judgment. We're appealing it, and we're going to appeal it to the highest court of the land because that belongs to the African National Congress. It's a legacy. It's our liberation heritage. Ifa namagugu ka ANC. I did want to clarify that part about if there's any coterie that is coming on.
You've said two things.
Jacob Zuma, it's not going to be something that is going to be welcomed because Jacob Zuma joined the ANC as an individual, not as a group.
So let's start there. I mean, are you not the one who's inviting this showdown on yourself by inviting former President Jacob Zuma, who is a member of the MK party for all intents and purposes, at least from where we sit. Your legalities and your policies and your processes aside. But from the outside, that's his party. It's been with him outside the court challenges where they've been challenging you on the trademark, where they've been challenging the IEC and so on and so forth. So they are with him. They go with him wherever he appears. They are also on a campaign trail. Are you not inviting the campaign trail of MK party to Luthuli House via this disciplinary hearing?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think we're cleaning house, Thabo. We are cleaning house. It's important. The ANC is on a path of renewing itself. And some of those that don't belong to the agenda of renewal are literally leaving the ANC, whether through commissions or acts of omission. And ANC is cleaning house. And it's a painful journey, but it's a journey that has yielded a lot of trust by the people of South Africa into the ANC once more. Why am I saying this? You go to the ground, look at how the ANC has been received in the elections campaign trail by all our national officials, by all of our national executive committee members where they've been.
Yeah.
We literally are the only party that is on the ground at the moment.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me whether you see other opposition parties.
But why not then opt to just stay there? Why do you not do this after elections? Why do you do this now? Because in a sense, you are dividing that kind of attention that you're saying you're already enjoying on the ground.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are legalistic matters. You know, the ANC constitution provides for certain things to be done within certain time frames. So I would imagine, and I don't want to try and speculate, because the NDC is a constitutional organ of the ANC, but that operates autonomously along the lines of the Integrity Commission, for example. But there are particular time frames and regulations and procedures that guide their work. And dragging the thing of this nature to after the elections, I would imagine this is something that they may have considered. Yeah. But I don't want to speak on behalf of the NDC. Dr. Ralph Mgijima, the chairperson of the NDC, who is supported by a team of very esteemed stalwarts and veterans of the ANC and strong legal minds of the ANC, time-tested individuals, would not have come to a decision to summons Mr. Jacob Zuma to a hearing without having considered a number of things. So it is not really for me, on behalf of the ANC, to speculate on those things, but we trust the NDC because we know of the work they've done, successful work they've done to support the renewal project of the African National Congress.
So you've already mentioned what analysts have been saying and other critics have been saying. So let's go there, right? One of the things that they've said, that this action that is now being taken by the NDC is actually an indictment on this generation of the ANC, that under your leadership, this generation, the extent of divisions within the party led to a point where, for the first time, a former president had to be held before a disciplinary committee.
Thabo, please amplify the last part.
Under this generation of the ANC, a former president is being held before a disciplinary committee, expressing the extent of the divisions that are now existing within the party.
Well, I think that's a very, if I may, that's a very ahistorical perspective. That can only be said by somebody who doesn't understand the history of the African National Congress. It is not the first time that this giant movement has faced instances where some of the most senior leaders are hauled before disciplinary committees of whatever kind, whether it was in exile or whether it was here in the country, or whether it was in the underground, or whether it was in the international solidarity pillar. We had 4 pillars to the struggle that ushered the freedom that we currently enjoy, all of us, including as we head off to Press Freedom Day tomorrow, the freedoms we enjoy as journalists, as media persons, it was under those 4 pillars. Now, to suggest that this thing is new, suggests that people are not looking at it, don't have a sense of history. There have been cases in the ANC in the past where senior leaders were disciplined simply because that's the culture of the ANC. And it can only be a mark of a return to a renewed ANC, to have a senior leader of the ANC being disciplined for ill-doing. And in the case of Mr. Jacob Zuma, there is no gainsaying about that issue. Sheer ill-discipline of the highest order. But we leave that to the National Disciplinary Committee because as much as we feel that way as leaders of the ANC, of this current generation, to use your reference, it is important that the ANC becomes consistent in how it applies discipline in the organization. That is why he needs to appear before the NDC, and we hope he will do so if he has a semblance of respect for the traditions and values of the ANC. There have been leaders of the ANC that have been disciplined in the past, some of whom are secretary generals, some of whom are presidents. So people who opine in that nature may very well be a thing of not understanding the history of the ANC and its culture and internal democratic traditions.
Mahlengi Bhengu-Motsiri, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on this evening. ANC spokesperson there on Jacob Zuma, the former president, being held before the NDC next week, Tuesday.